Good morning and good afternoon from my side. I'm really pleased to be today with you and to have opportunity to present the process which we had in Montenegro and our future endeavors about implementation of this document. Also, I would like to thank very much to RTDI and to Ecological Footprint as well for kind support and for making us today together with you and for this great opportunity to widely share our experience, to see your viewpoints, and hoping that we may through our common efforts in supporting Agenda 2030 to be effectively and efficiently implemented. With this slide, I will try shortly just to pass you through the process, actually to the elements on which our new process in Montenegro was based on, since National Sustainable Development Policy is not a new one, it is actually the policy which we established in the country in 2007. And before that, we had a 3 years lasting process which resulted in the adoption of the document in 2007 and establishment of the institutional setup which was created to support this document implementation. So when we start to think how to align ourselves with the Rio Plus 20 outcomes and later on with the Agenda 2030, we were very much relying on the results of implementation of the previous strategy. Since in the period 2007-2012 there was regular monitoring and reporting on the results of implementation of the action plan of the strategy from 2007. So we had 51 was the final one, progress reports, which we were using as to identify where we stand, what are the needs, what are the successful achievements, and to identify the gaps and challenges for the period to come. Also, we were very much relying on another relevant processes, like the process of integration of Montenegro to EU and the priorities which we have in that process in different chapters from the environment to the other one which were relevant for the sustainable development policy. We were focusing very much on some very specific and relevant documents of the European Union which are relevant for sustainable development policy, like EU 2020, EU Resource Efficiency Roadmap, but also to the Mediterranean processes. And I have to say that the previous document, strategy from 2007, was actually developed under supervision and guidelines of the Mediterranean Commission for Sustainable Development and using Mediterranean Strategy for Sustainable Development as the regional baseline document to which we actually aligned our national process. In this phase now, creating new strategy for the next 15 years, we were using inputs from Mediterranean Strategy for Sustainable Development, new one, Sustainable Consumption and Production Regional Action Plan, and also Regional Framework for Adaptation to Climate Change. So all these have been used as the input for our new document, but key guiding document, our key obligation with which we actually compare and harmonize our national process was Agenda 2030 with Addis Ababa Action Plan regarding financing for sustainable development. Having this broad strategic framework as the basis to create a new policy, we actually, as I said, identify where are the key gaps, and we then initiated development of the specific expert analyses which have been produced as to serve as the very specific inputs for new document. And I will mention some of them, like very deep and extensive analysis of the policy and legislative framework in a country of relevance for sustainable development, ecological footprint and biocapacity, calculation of domestic material consumption and resource productivity, introduction of the UNEP methodology, how to calculate use and spend of land consumption, and development of certain number of indicators related to that, and of course a particular challenge for us presented the list of UN indicators which was published this year. So it was actually key input for us in national document to develop integrated system for sustainable development indicators. This is just a schematic presentation of some of the most important steps in using all this knowledge, all these inputs from 2012 up to now. So Rio was 20 process, then in Montenegro we had our national process to which we are very much proud. It is the process people of Montenegro participation, where we actually, with support of UN system in Montenegro, were making consultations with our citizens to see what they see as the priorities for their development, for development of Montenegro, and for the improvement of the quality of their life. So we really had a very broad participation. More than 12,000 people of Montenegro participated in this process, and we received very valuable inputs which actually helped us to shape our processes and which actually enable us to be sure that the priorities and the strategic goals which we defined in our new national document are actually ones which correspond with the views of our population. Also, we were investing a lot of time and energy, and we are proud on that, in participation in open working group established under umbrella of UN for negotiation on post-2015 process and later on Agenda 2030. So Montenegro was participating in pair with Slovenia, and we actually, although we are a small country, small population, we really had opportunity to participate on equal footing in presenting what are the priorities we see from our national perspective, from the perspective of the region to which we belong, and we are proud that we achieve to insert some important elements in Agenda 2030 which then have been globally accepted and approved. And actually all this led to introduction of the globally approved document, Agenda 2030, to our national strategy for sustainable development. This is just an image of the first page of our cover page of our document. For the time being, the process of designing the document is just ongoing, and we hope that beginning of next year there will be English version of the document also available, and we will be really glad to share widely with any who is interested to look at it. This is just some main elements what new strategy present for my country, for the policy and institutional setup. So actually this is the document which defines the principles, the strategic goals and the measures for achieving long-term sustainable development of the society, taking into account national needs, national priorities and international obligations. So comparing both and defining the responses which are joint responses to both the national needs and to international obligations. At the same time, this document is umbrella horizontal long-term development strategy of Montenegro, which tackle almost all important social, economic, environmental, human policy documents, and actually the process, the period which will come is very challenging for us, since there is a number of strategic documents which we have to check with regard to their compatibility with the strategy for sustainable development. Some main incompatibilities are identified in this document, and now in next 2 years we have to work for their harmonization with the national strategy for sustainable development. As I mentioned, the process was led in a way that we start from identification of gaps, different kind of gaps in sense of identifying unsustainable development trends and what are the causes for these unsustainabilities. For example, when we're speaking about non-sustainability in using forests, water, space, human resources, but also when we analyze institutional frameworks, does it comply with the requirements for the implementation of sustainable development, and in those aspects where it is not in compliance, what are the gaps and how we should fulfill that gaps. Also, in our special focus was on the system of financing, public finances, how to make them more adjusted to the needs of the sustainable development policy, not just looking from the perspective of implementation of this document, of this new strategy, but also making downscaling debt finances horizontally over the sectoral policies and making them capable to support implementation of the national policies to the concrete actions in the sectoral policies. Also, for us, it is very important to find a way how to harmonize conflicting sectoral policies. So we have two kinds of conflicts in between national strategy or national policy for sustainable development and sectoral policies at some points, but also we were looking for the incompatibilities in between different sectoral strategies. And the final, when we analyzed all these elements and when we defined our national responses to these gaps, we were then comparing how that actually corresponds with our international obligation. And then in that second iteration, we were actually doing for a combination of our national responses to improve them, to adjust them in a way to make them, to present responses also with regard to requirements of the Agenda 2030. This slide just gives overview on the structure of the document on actually 7 chapters. So first one explaining the what is the role of the strategy, and in principle this is what I have explained now. Second chapter provides very deep assessment of the national resources, since we decide to structure the document in a way to have key 4 pillars which present key 4 national resources: human, social, natural and economic, and a part of that to have another 2 horizontal cross-cutting theme: governance for sustainable development and financing for sustainable development. Based on this analysis, we then applied the PSIR methodology, Travis Pressure States Impacted Responses, is to identify the gaps. And then in chapter 4, we defined the responses to these gaps in a way to provide how Montenegro will provide answer to these problems, to these gaps in the time scale of next 15 years. Then we actually defined what is the priority theme for each of the pillars of the strategy. So in the area of human resources, we decided to have the priority theme improving the status of human resources and strengthening of the social cohesion. In the social resources, we decided to deal with the responses on the theme support to values, norms and behavior patterns of importance for the sustainability of Montenegrin society. When we come to the natural area, we were speaking about protection of natural capital. In the sphere of economic development, economic resources, we were dealing with the introduction of green economy, incompatibility with resource efficiency. Speaking about governance for sustainable development, we were looking how to provide improvement of the existing governance system for sustainable development, and leading aspect for financing for sustainable development was actually to compare what we have in a country and what we are obliged actually according to the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. For each of these priority themes, we defined strategic goals. For each of the strategic goals, we defined the priority measures, and later on in chapter 6, which is actually the action plan of the strategy, we defined a group of actions, sub-measures for each of the measures which are really concrete and implementable, how we should deal with resolving the problem and with providing responses on concrete problem we are dealing with. Also, action plan provides identification of the responsible authorities, provides a list of indicators which will measure achievements in the process of implementation of any of the sub-measures, and also action plan provides targets that we actually want to achieve in implementing the action plan of the strategy. Chapter 7 deals with the structure of the monitoring and reporting process, and really key element of this chapter is integrated system of indicators to monitor the process of implementation of this strategy and to report on the achievements. This is just a schematic presentation how we actually, through definition of the goals, of the measures and sub-measures, inserted all 17 SDGs, and out of 169 targets in Agenda 2030, 167 were inserted in our document through the measures and sub-measures. Two of them were not relevant to Montenegro. They are mainly related to the small island countries. This is just also information how many indicators out of 241, actually around 42%. This figure here is a bit increased. To the end of the process, we will insert to our monitoring and reporting process until 2018. This slide provides, I would say, short presentation of the key strategic goals related to the pillars of this strategy. So, in the field of the human resources and priorities, the theme which I mentioned before, dealing with improvement of the human capacities and social cohesion, we defined the list of the strategic goals here presented. So these strategic goals are related to the demographic trends and how to resolve the problem of demographic deficit, how to provide healthy lives and well-being for the citizens of Montenegro, how to support inclusiveness of education and to support lifelong learning process. In the sphere of social resources, the strategic goals are formulated in a way to look for active participation of all relevant stakeholders in a country, how to support the system of values. So this was the first time in Montenegro we were dealing with the values of our society, the traditional ones, but also new values which have been created under impact of the process of globalization, of the process of different kinds of integrations my country is passing through. So this is a really key aspect of having interaction of Montenegro with modern trends, globalization trends, and the way how we can, provide, how we can save our national identity and, integrate ourselves in the, more successfully integrate ourselves in the global European processes. Social responsible acting was another relevant strategic goal, rule of law, employment, stimulation, culture and cultural heritage, equitable development. In the sphere of natural resources, we were dealing with preventing degradation, efficient management, particularly important thing was environment and health, because this is really a priority for them quite long period of time, but it was not properly positioned in a policy setup. So now we're trying to see how to deal with the needs in this sphere. Sustainable spatial planning, efficient use of non-renewable resources, how to mitigate hazardous impacts. In the sphere of economic resources, we were relying to the UNEP approach, what is green economy. So actually, we undertake the goal from the our ANDC related to the Paris Agreement to reduce the CO2 emissions for 30% compared to 1990 level. Then key leading aspect of this part of the document was how to improve resource efficiency in the key sectors of economic development like tourism, agriculture, industry, transport, tourism and services. In this aspect, we were relying very much on the previously done study by UNDP. It was resource efficiency in Montenegro, document of resource efficiency in Montenegro produced in 2014, relying on EU roadmap on resource efficiency. Then we were looking how to put our national policy related to the waste management, which is really one of the key problems, environmental problems, to correspond with the requirements of circular economy, marine resources and integrated coastal zone management, where we actually relying on the national strategy for integrated coastal zone management, which was developed last year with support of UNEP map, and it is in the force now. Also the timeline horizon for its implementation is 15 years, next 15 years. So also the instruments of how to green the economy, how to enforce greening economic activities was a strategic goal related to the others which I mentioned now in the field of economic resources, social responsibility, and how to improve competitiveness of Montenegrin economy. Governance as the cross-horizontal chapter defined 5 groups of strategic goals. So first group is related to the strengthening governance system for sustainable development, how to strengthen environmental management is a particularly important element of the system of governance for sustainable development, how to reform governance systems for sustainable development, how to establish system for monitoring and reporting, and financing for sustainable development, how to make it oriented to support the goals which I just presented. So since I have passed away my time, which was envisaged for my participation on the presentation, I will just pass through the slides. So in the slides which I just passed, actually there is more detailed elaboration of the strategic goals and measures which I mentioned. On this slide, I have here the structure of different kinds of sources for financing sustainable development policy, by taking into account the requirements of this of the Addis Ababa Agenda Action document. Here we have the structure actually of our system of indicators which we introduced in the document, which is composed of the UN list of 241. Another list is very important for us, which is different from the UN, this list of national indicators which are monitored for the time being in Montenegro, and we find that that list can support successfulness of successful reporting of the progress of the NSSD implementation. It is a list of 273 indicators. Another group of indicators which we call the international indicators are actually the indicators which are measured also for Montenegro by some relevant international organizations, so we decided also to involve them in the strategy, and composite indicators, cumulative indicators, 10 of them, to which we are very proud since half of them have been elaborated to the separate analysis and inserted in the document, and for the rest we will actually make our efforts to develop them in the process of implementation next 2-3 years. These indicators are important since really they give you cumulative picture where society stands, how much it is sustainable and how much it is non-sustainable, looking from the cross-sectoral viewpoint and not just looking at some specific sectoral aspect. This is the plan how we will monitor the process of implementation. So in principle, our idea is that in 2018 we will have 42.3% of the just presented indicators inserted in our national monitoring and reporting system. Until 2020, 15%, in next 2 years another 15%, and that will lead us to have 75% in 2024. We plan to have first report on the implementation of this strategy for sustainable development in 2019, and after that each 2 years we will report on the progress, and we also envisage to have deep revision of the action plan of this document each 5 years. So 2020 will be revision of the action plan, 2025 another one, and in 15 years to revise the whole document. On the next slide there are projections of some most important economic parameters and social development parameters with which we actually want to increase employment, to increase participation of the population from 15 to 64 years in so actually to improve their employments and in that way to generate better economic benefits for the state. So I will not go into details. I was going over the permitted time. I will just say one sentence more. Actually, in July this year, we presented our national document at the high-level political forum in New York. So the report which we presented is available, and we can share it. It's available in English. And additional value of this document compared to the strategy is that actually this document summarizes all measures and sub-measures which are prescribed by the national strategy and group them per the Sustainable Development Goals. These are the most important challenges for the next period, which are related to strengthening institutional setup, increasing budgeting, and strengthening monitoring mechanisms. I mentioned also the process of harmonizing policies, sectoral policies in the National Strategy for Sustainable Development. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, to be in the webinar, and thanks again, Derek, for the organization of these. I will try to go quickly through my slides, which basically are focusing on the indicator system that was developed to monitor the progresses of Montenegro towards the new National Strategy for Sustainable Development. So as Jelena mentioned, the strategy is structured around these 6 main thematic areas, which were guided really in their development by all the global and regional processes that Jelena mentioned, but primarily were guided by the Agenda 2030. However, where the Agenda 2030 and its core elements, which are the Sustainable Development Goals, come to play, play the biggest role within the process that we put in place, that we followed, is in the construction of the monitoring system for the national strategy. So we really decided and wanted to put the SDGs at the core of this monitoring framework for Montenegro. So our aim was to look at sustainability in a systemic and multidisciplinary way. I want to stress this because what it means is that we really try to bring sustainability across all sectors of the economy of Montenegro, and not limited to a discussion in the environment or sustainable development ministry. So we try really to set up what we call an integrated monitoring framework. We call it integrated because it is made of, let's say, 3 types of different indicators. And each one of these indicators really has a specific role. So first of all, the central role is for the SDGs indicators, and they were really used as a way to transpose in the national document what is the global process of the Agenda 2030. Then, of course, there are issues of priority for Montenegro that are not already included in the SDGs, that are not tracked by the SDGs. So that's why we couple the SDGs indicators with a series of national indicators. And finally, I will touch more on this later, but the idea was, if we want to look at sustainability in a systemic way, we also need not just the details, indicators that are able to go into the details, but we also wanted to include some more broader, let's say, we call it like cumulative or composite indicators that can provide an easy monitoring and help in the communication of the overall progress of Montenegro towards sustainability. So our aim was really to build this integrated monitoring framework. So starting from the SDGs, of course the most important element was to understand what is the capacity of the country to track these indicators, the 241 indicators that were agreed in March by the Interagency Expert Group on SDGs. So to do that, we started a series of consultation with 36 bodies that in Montenegro are responsible somehow, are reporting data. So overall 36 data reporting institutions were contacted, and we consulted with them. Before this consultation, we basically did a pre-screening of the SDGs. We allocated them across the 6 thematic areas of the national strategy, and we also pre-screened which organization in the country we suppose was going to be responsible for these indicators. So then all this mapping, this pre-screening was sent to each of the 36 institutions, and then we met with them. When we met with them, of course, we double-checked the information, and we also looked for 2 types of informations. Whether the institution was able to fully or partially track these indicators, and to do it now by 2018 or after 2018. Why this is important? Because the first reporting, as Jelena mentioned, will be done in 2019, so we wanted to have an idea of what the reporting capacity will be by the time that the first reporting is done in 2019. And then just a clarification what I mean by fully and partially tracking an indicator. So we wanted to know whether the indicator could be tracked exactly as defined by Interagency Expert Group, or whether the national body was providing a sort of a similar indicator, not exactly the same, that could be used as a proxy. So the first important results of these is that of the 26 bodies that we contacted, 26 of them, so 26 out of 36, had data relative to the SDGs. So this is very important because already we start to see that this process, the process of transposing SDGs in a national context, is really a government-wide exercise. Is not limited within specific ministries, but it really tracks almost all of the ministries and bodies in a country. Of course, there are bodies like the Monstat, which is the Statistical Institute of Montenegro, who is responsible for a big share of the SDGs, 52 of them, and other bodies are responsible only for a limited number of indicators. But this is a very first important learnings from this exercise. The second important learning from this is that of these 26 organizations, only 8 of them, these are those that you see here as indicated with the yes information, are official producers of statistics, meaning that they are legally recognized as producer of statistics by the central governments and therefore authorized to communicate these indicators. Many of the other bodies are in fact instead only administrative producers. So we will see the consequence of these later on, but there is clearly a difference in the way they are entitled to report these indicators internationally. So this is the final information that we got out of the mapping of the SDGs indicators. Just to say that we found that by 2018, Montenegro will be able to track about 98 indicators. Of the 143 indicators non-tracked, 20 were found as non-relevant. Jelena already mentioned some targets that are not applicable to Montenegro. And for the others, we proposed a plan to introduce them gradually to reach 75% coverage of the SDGs by 2024. here what is important to note is that most of these indicators are in the area of social resources, mostly, and then human resources. And the biggest coverage is for, again, for human and for economic resources, with a very limited capacity to track governance and financing for sustainable development. The second category of indicators, I will basically skip through these very quickly. These, as I mentioned, are indicators, national indicators that are already included in other processes within the country, and therefore were included into the national strategy. This list will need to be updated and revised during the next 2-3 years before the first reporting. So I will not touch more on this. What I want to touch to conclude this part on the monitoring are the composite indicators. So here what we look at was all the composite indicators provided by academia, NGOs, research center, and so on. And then the long list, the comprehensive mapping, was then, the long list that we obtained out of this mapping was reduced by looking at the criteria that you see here, the scientific credibility of the institutions providing the information, the indicator relevance, how relevant it is for Montenegro, how regularly it will be updated, and so on. So in the end, we decided to keep this set of cumulative indicators limited to maximum 1 or 2 indicators per thematic area, with the sole exception of the natural resources theme, because that was highly, if you want, underrepresented by both the SDGs and the national indicators. So to have like some better covering and tracking of these thematic areas, we had 3 composite indicators. For each of these indicators, we generated fact sheet to help with the understanding of the research question, the results, and how to read and interpret the results. And then important to say that some of these indicators, let's say, they were first identified on a theoretical basis, and then some of them have already been piloted within the country, like the domestic material consumption, the ecological footprint, or the human development index. For the others, we are recommending a piloting, for instance, for the environmental performance index or environmental democracy index, before they can actually be included within the statistical system of Montenegro. So that is the final resulting integrated monitoring framework. You will get the PowerPoint, so I'm not going to discuss this more. All I want to say here is that what we tried to do with this integrated monitoring framework was somehow to bridge the gap in between what are the governance needs for sustainability. So you need to really look at specific issues at the nation or sometimes at the subnational level versus the scientific needs for sustainability, which require more of a systemic and complex approach and an overview on the direction that we try to do to provide with the composite indicators. So, to close, where are we now and what are the next steps? Jelena already mentioned some of these, but I want to just to stress some of them. Well, first of all, as Jelena said, the strategy was adopted on the 7th of July this year. So this is we just entered in the implementation phase. So the very first important aspect in the implementation will be the continuous monitoring of the global process, because we know already that there are 2 revisions in 2020 and 2025 of the global process and of the SDG indicator list. So we will have to monitor this process and make sure that changes are implemented also at the national level. Then, again, as mentioned by Elena, there is a need also to align this national process with what is the newest Mediterranean strategy for sustainable development, which was just approved. Then, so I'm going from the global to the national level. There is really a need to set up and test what, let's say, a database and an information reporting system for all these indicators. So how to create a place, a platform in which all the data can be collected and from which they can be used for international reporting. Here we have looked at various options during the work around the NSSD finalization, and what we found out to be perhaps the most interesting approach is the one provided by two tools, let's say. On one side, the IRIS, which is the Indicator Reporting Information System, co-developed by UNEP and AGIDI, actually, and then link these with the UNEP Live platform. So during this implementation phase, we will be working on testing the possibility to use the IRIS platform as the central platform for Montenegro, and then link it, as I said, with UNEP Live for the international reporting. Finally, I mean, also as next steps, there is the need for a revision of the statistical legislation system. What I mean by this, going back to the official and administrative data producers that we mentioned before, so we came up with recommendations for the administrative producers, which in some cases were to apply to become an official producer. In other cases were to apply for a data validation procedure by the Statistical Institute. But of course, we need to understand how to make this as easy as possible. And then the piloting of the composite indicators that I mentioned before is another activity that we will do in the next year. Finally, to close, really, communication efforts I put here. So Jelena already introduced these. We are now working on translating most of the documentation in English so that this can be shared with the outside world as well. And we will start, as of January next year, also a process of transposing these national strategy and therefore the SDGs at the subnational level. So in early January we will have a first workshop with the local authorities, 23 local authorities of Montenegro, to start this process of subnational transposition of the SDGs. And that's really all from my side. So I think now we can take questions. Thank you so much, and I hope I didn't take too much time. Thank you.
First question that I have on the list here was from Dr. Kostas Teregas, who we know well in Eye on Earth, from George Washington University.
Yes, thank you, Derek. The question is for Jelena, and since I'm one of my hats is a university professor at George Washington University, I wonder if, Jelena, you can speak a little bit about the role that you may have developed for your academic sector, your universities in Montenegro in this process. Do you look to universities for research, for policy analysis, for data collection, provide technical assistance to subnational units? How is it that you engage the university sector? Because in many countries, we find that the universities provide a stable and a long-term resource for efforts such as yours. And congratulations, by the way. It's a very, very impressive process that you've started.
Thank you, Dr. Teregas. Really thank you for this question, which is indeed very important for creation any policy, its implementation, and in particular such a comprehensive one like the sustainable development policies. I will just say some, let's say, introductory remarks about role of our academic sector. So some faculties, also some universities, which are not only the state university, but also some private universities here in Montenegro, which actually participated in development of some of the expert analyses. Some of them I have mentioned in my introductory slides, which served as the basis for development of the new strategy. A part of that, it is very important that in Montenegro we have National Council for Sustainable Development, which is advisory body to the government. It was established after Johannesburg summit in 2002, and for some time period it was chaired by the Prime Minister, and in last 3 years it is chaired by the President of the state. It is not just by whom it is chaired, but I'm mentioning that since really a representation at such highest political level actually provides political support to the whole process, but a part of the chairperson, this body actually integrate all relevant groups and stakeholders in Montenegrin society. So there are representatives, few of them from the government, but from the representative of each university which is present in Montenegro, or the business community, banking community, civil sector, NGOs, local municipalities, etc. So through that channel, academic community also participates in monitoring, advising, guiding the process of implementing national policy for sustainable development. Also, National Council has its expert bodies for sustainable development policy, for mitigation adaptation to climate change, for resource efficiency, and for the integrated coastal zone management. Through these 4 bodies, we actually also involved academic community as to enable them to guide us at a very technical expert level of preparing the documents for the National Council for Sustainable Development. So this is the structure which exists in the country for more than 40 years now, 30-40 years now, and with this document we actually put some new element. With the strategy for sustainable development for next 15 years, we put a new element. That element is actually related to the science policy interface. We are negotiating with the UNDP office here in Montenegro now for, I would say, 4 years, but actively last 2 years, how to reform a part of the UNDP in Montenegro, precisely UNDP's Cluster for Economy and Environment, into the Center for Sustainable Development, which will not be a new institution, but which will be the common program of the government of Montenegro and UNDP. We are now in the final stage of defining their program for the next 5 years. So we are identifying what are the priority themes, what are the strategic goals and the measures to which UNDP system can support an NSSD implementation in next 5 years, but from which aspects? From the aspects of implementing concrete projects and the programs which will introduce science policy interface. For an example, this huge list of indicators which we inserted in our document, for many of them we need very specific scientific expertise, analysis, in a way to decide how to gather data, how to collect and then gather data, how to analyze data, how to put them in a very specific methodological concept as to serve for the implementation of the NSSD. It is just one aspect. There are many others, for instance, resource efficiency, greening economy, sustainable consumption production patterns, and how to, green traditional industry here in Montenegro, which is based on the old technologies, as to insert new green ones, CO2 carbon neutral, as to improve environmental aspects of their performance. So these are actually main elements. There are so many others, very specific details, and I will be really glad to provide some additional information when we finish the webinar.
Yes. The next question we have is from Patricia Almeida Ashley. Patricia, would you like to put your question, please?
Yes, please. Thank you. I am from Brazil, Universidade Federal Fluminense. I research on policies for sustainable development. And our concern in Brazil is about the size and the number of federated levels, because we are a federation. For Elena, please. I understand that a key step for the National Strategy for Sustainable Development is its multi-level strategic alignment of international frameworks, both also of global, European, continental, and Mediterranean regional, but also at national and subnational frameworks. So both international and national, subnational, taking both expert and also society contributions in a participatory process. I wonder now about the strategic alignment of frameworks with budget allocated from international and also from national sources. How Montenegro is dealing with traditional or consolidated budget patterns for allocation in country level public budgeting based on political support of parliament members and economic power of non-sustainable ways of production and consumption economy, which are usually very powerful in resisting to adopt sustainability. Is tax policy one way of valuing sustainable process and production in public and private economy? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you also for a very important and substantial question for implementation of SD policy. I was just shortly mentioned in the presentation that we actually developed one chapter of the NSSD which actually deals with analysis of the existing structure of the sources which finance sustainable development policy and related sectoral policies, but also with providing recommendation how to adjust public system of financing the sustainable development. So we actually defined all relevant sources to support implementation or to enable implementation of the sustainable development policies. So these are national public sources, national private sources, international public sources, international private sources. This is just the title of the groups, but inside each of them there is a detailed specification of the sub-sources to which finances will come to support implementation of the measures. Then we were looking for the budgeting lines in our state budget, and we were trying to identify where are those lines which are incompatible or harmful for sustainable development, and then we were looking how we may reduce or eliminate that aspect in our budgeting system. Recognizing that, we were also then identifying a huge list of instruments which would actually support elimination of such kind of that, let's say, elements which are harmful from the perspective of the sustainable development. So some of the instruments which we recommend to be inserted and to be supported through the public finances are Eco Fund, establishment of the Eco Fund in Montenegro, then different green economic instruments, then to eliminate all harmful subsidies from the public financing, for instance, harmful subsidies which were allocating for a number of years for aluminium production in Montenegro, etc. Then we recognize kind of grants, subsidies, and loans which can support the sustainable development policy implementation, but also looking also these instruments from the perspective of the public-private partnerships. A part of that, we were also looking for the kind of the instruments which can be provided by the private investors which are present in Montenegro, and how to create that investments to become more green and more supportive to the sustainable development policies, but mainly relying on the mechanisms of the public-private partnerships. In principle, then we were comparing all these and how that can contribute to the long-term sustainability of the financing for sustainable development, and we put a projection which actually requires that 1 to 1.5% of the budget of Montenegro, so budget of the state of Montenegro allocated through the government until 2020, should be allocated for the system of the governance for sustainable development and for the program activities for sustainable use of natural resources. It is not the whole what we will allocate for sustainable development. This is just for these two components, while the rest of the instruments which I was mentioned are to be structured and implemented through the through the sectoral policies implementation. So, for instance, through the transport sector, to the sector of energy, tourism, etc., etc. This person speaking about program activities to support sustainable use of natural resources and system governance for sustainable development until 2030 should come to the 2% of the budget of Montenegro. Also, then we gave the projections with these measures what we will achieve in next 5 or 15 years. So our projection is that employment rate will grow up to from now at, which is at the level of 52.5% to 56 in the group from 50 to 64 years until 2025, or to 20,000 employment in this category of population until 2025. Also, we gave projections of GDP that should be doubled until the 2030. Also, we were looking how each sector will contribute to the growth of the employment, in particular focusing on the sector of tourism, where we were very much relying on the projection of the World Tourism Travel and Tourism Council projections. Also, we were going inside the structure of the GDP and which sector will contribute at what level to the growth of the GDP, but also how each sector should be reorganized in a way to reduce consumption of the natural resources, in a way to provide resource efficiency to be at the level of 20% until 2020 compared to the average in the period 2005-2012. So actually these are main elements, and it is not to be implemented just at the national level. All this is national and then downscale to the next level, and only one next level in Montenegro, it is the level of local municipalities. So there are a lot of very specific elements, but I think that I tackled this very, very important, and it is important also to mention that we defined the obligation for the Ministry of Finance to create one specific unit inside the structure of Ministry of Finance, which will take care about adjustment of the state budget, of the government budget on the annual level to be aligned with these requirements and with these projections.
We have a question from Arthur Dahl.
Yes, thank you. From the International Environment Forum. And we've looked at the Agenda 2030 as very much a top-down process, but it's supposed to be an agenda of, by, and for the people. So beyond what you're looking at government action and government indicators, does the strategy address other partners in civil society and empowering the general public to act at the community and individual levels? Are you looking eventually at having indicators that people can look at themselves in their towns, in their neighborhoods, in their communities, or even in their own family life, as measuring their progress towards sustainable development goals?
My understanding of the process of the Global 2030 agenda is that it is a mix of top-down and bottom-up, actually. Because from one side, yes, it is true, as you described, that it is top-down, also as I have described before, and it's kind of what we follow right now, an attempt to bring at the local level, so far only at the national level, an overall global indication. At the same time, however, there is also a recommendation from the UN while transposing the agenda at the global level to come up also with suggestion, with feedback that can inform again, back up the global process. One example of this is, for instance, the way in which some of the indicators or targets that don't have specific indicators associated may be received and put in practice by each individual nations. So I would say that it is a mix of the two processes, top-down and bottom-up. Now, for what you ask specifically of, let's say, the role of the local communities and like citizens, as Jelena mentioned, they were involved in the process of drafting the national strategies. So more than 12,000 people were involved during the consultations and had the possibility to provide a feedback, an input to the drafting of the national strategy. However, I think I will say that so far probably we haven't reached down to the level that you are probably envisioning with your question, because really most of the efforts were done to equip the country of Montenegro with a national, with an updated national strategies that really it's consistent with the global process. I think that it's really the next phase that we are going through, this in transposition of the national strategy down to the local authorities, that will give us the possibility to really bring this element down to the individuals. So I would say that this is like what we have in front of us during next year, and we will have to learn this process as we go.
Thank you very much.
Simon Wilson.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you. Both today's speakers have really provided support. Jelena, would you mind just saying a few words about the process by which you dug into and unearthed the root causes of unsustainable practices in Montenegro? Define them, and what was the process?
Mm-hmm. Yes, actually, I have mentioned that we applied DPSIR methodology, so drivers, pressures, states, impact, and responses. These actually drivers and the pressures are in the, I would say, are the key elements of in our root cause analysis of the causes to generate the problems. So we were focusing on all the documents which I was mentioned. So, for instance, annual reports, implementation of national strategy for sustainable development, institutional and legislative analysis which we developed for the purpose of the national strategy for sustainable development, which we actually created for that purpose, and a number of other documents which have been relevant for development of the new strategy. So then we were analyzing, grouping this document in, let's say, 5 main groups. So natural, human, social, and economic resources, and the governance system. And we were identifying where are actually the non-sustainabilities? Where are the gaps? In that way, that part of our work was facilitated since through the work of our National Council for Sustainable Development. We regularly, monitor the sectoral policies and the legislation and some projects and the programs which are implemented in Montenegro. So we exactly know where are the indication of the non-sustainabilities. So we identified that non-sustainabilities, group them in these 5, let's just say, subgroups, and then we were looking for the origin of these problems in the period of, let's say, previous 10 years. And then we were classified these, let's say, drivers on the direct, then next level of the direct with regard to the time horizon when the cause actually impacted the problem which we are facing now. So in principle, this is the methodology. It requires the time. It, requires also, I would say, a lot of time, for working and the comprehensive and the multitasking team which should deal with identification of the root causes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Questioner is Anuradha Gupta. Seems to be some technical problem. What he's typed here, he expresses his gratitude for the presentation, and he says, I just wanted to know what specific methodology you used to engage the people of Montenegro in the process of revealing the strategy.
Well, it was the broad participation process, which actually was facilitated by UN system here in Montenegro. At the first, let's say, the preparation stage for development of the new strategy, we actually were relying on this mechanism, which was supported by a number of communicative tools. So open, online, web platform, number of meetings, questionnaires, possibility to allow them to raise the questions, and then from the side of the government and the public institutions to provide the answers. And then there was the expert team who was actually recruited, to formulate and create specific questionnaires which have been available online, and to which we then collected the answers. Based on that, actually, we identified what are the main elements population of Montenegro finds are the most relevant to be treated through new, let's say, era of sustainable development policy in a country and worldwide. Apart to that, through the process of creating the document itself from the government, we organized few iterations of the public consultations. So each part of the process was not completed without consultations with the broadest possible spectrum of the stakeholders. So, when we have been at the first stage, we create the, let's say, platform, very broad document which identified different elements, and then we were discussing again with the representatives, of course, from the government sector, from the local sector, of science community, but with the citizens of Montenegro through organization of the different kind of the workshops round tables in the municipalities over the Montenegro. After that, when we prepared the draft of the document, we were discussing about the strategic goals which we decide to deal with, and we were asking the questions which help us to get opinions and suggestions from the population of Montenegro, from the citizens, from the NGO sector, and all interested stakeholders in the country, what kind of measures we should plan as to implement these strategic goals. And finally, when the document, final draft of the document was approved by the government December last year, we organized 3 months of the public consultations as to discuss the document itself. And when this process was completed, we revisited the document, and the final proposal, which was actually adopted in July by the government, actually comprised all relevant suggestions that we received from the participants and stakeholders interested to create sustainable development policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will bring the questions to an end at that point. I wonder if I could just ask for a few words of appreciation and thanks from the Eye on Earth Alliance, who have convened this webinar. Can I invite William Sontag from the Group of Earth Observations, which is the organisation currently chairing the Eye on Earth Alliance, just to make some a word of thanks to our speaker.
My great thanks to you for that, and Elena and Alessandro, thank you very much for this presentation. As the Alliance and GEO and a number of other entities, including the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, work to help countries and be engaged with countries adopting the Sustainable Development Goals and the data resources necessary to support them. Again, your story and your description of activities is inspiring. We'd like to bring it to a larger audience if we can through the Alliance and through the UN processes in 2017. Some of you may be attending the World Data Forum in Cape Town in January, and then other groups meeting through the UN process were in 2017. So again, my thanks, and I appreciate Derek doing all the logistics work here, and look forward to additional webinars. Thanks.